in all times. Even in the Greek language, Christos means Christ, and that is just for Mashiach or Messiah, not God.
What is your name, please?
Arlette? Arlette?
Where are you from?
Well, very interesting. I happen to have lived with the three religions in Lebanon, and I agree with Rabbi Abadi when he said religion can be peaceful, but when there is interest of state or politics, this is when it comes.
That was my whole point. When church became politicized, 325 or later, it was a disaster. In the same way, Turkey in the 1920s went the opposite way with Ataturk, and it was a liberation.
Let me just respond to some of your points. Number one, I am, as I said, this is not the subject of tonight's debate, but it is worth, since you asked it, and it's worth revisiting for a moment. I am confused as to why modern day religion in general, and Christians in particular, have really made gay men and women the big boogeymen of our time. I'm utterly confused by it. I'm well aware of the verses of Leviticus. I have a member of my family who is gay. And what I always say to him is, the Jewish approach is simple. There's 613 commandments in the Torah. One is that you should not practice gay sex. Another is you should have children. That leaves you 611. That'll keep you busy. Wow, okay. But in Christianity, it's almost, if you're gay, that's it. You crossed the line, it's all over. Who chose this particular commandment? There's 630 commandments in the Bible. Why this one? I don't get it. So you'll say to me, because if a man lies with a man, they can't produce children. And if a woman lies with a woman, she can't produce children. And you said the purpose of men and women is to have kids. That is inaccurate. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 makes it absolutely clear. Quote, therefore shall a man leave his father and leave his mother. He shall cleave unto his wife. They should have sex, in other words. Cleave, a clear sexual euphemism. So that they become one flesh. There's no mention of children. The purpose of sex is intimacy. I wrote about this in my book, Kosher Sex. Let me prove it. Sir, let me prove it to you. Let me prove it to you. Should a man and a woman who are religious stop having sex after the wife is postmenopausal? She can't conceive anymore. So sex should no longer be part. That's a terrible marriage. Could you imagine if a wife felt as soon as she turns 45, 50, she's postmenopausal, her husband won't even lie with her anymore because she can't have children? That's an insult. That would be a terrible marriage. I have a million proofs to the fact that the purpose of sex is not procreation. Here's another one. The fact is that women, when they get pregnant, still love having sex, and we are the only organisms that do. In the animal world, every time the female is pregnant, she will not accept a male. Sex is about intimacy. And I'm sure plenty of Christian couples, because Christians, certainly Protestant Christians, emphasize the beauty of sex in marriage. When a wife is pregnant, they continue to have a sex life. Now, based on what you said, they probably shouldn't, because the purpose has already been achieved. That's the first thing. Hang on. Let's move to the next point. Very little, and also finally, hopefully a very small part of male-female sex is about actual intercourse, conception mode intercourse. Kissing, what's the point of kissing? I mean, the mouth wasn't built for that, right? The mouth was built for digestion. My point is, I know the Bible's teachings on heterosexuality and homosexuality, and I'm not contradicting them. I'm simply saying, this is what religion has become in America? Opposition to gay people? I don't even know where this came from. Okay. Forget the fact marriages are falling apart, divorce is rampant, teenagers are lost, the churches in so many places are empty, the synagogues are empty, and what are we worrying about? Gay people. Go and explain that.
Okay.
Wait. I'm almost done. About Islam. You said about Islam. That Islam has always been violent. You know, I made a point. We in the Jewish community, I remind our brothers and sisters, amidst all the problems that the Jewish community has with Islam today, and the attacks by Islamic fundamentalists killing Jews, targeting Jews around the world, not just in Israel, we Jews dare never forget that this is not Islam. That Islam took us in when the Christians kicked us out. That doesn't mean that I have a very good grudge against my Christian brothers and sisters either. It just means, let's put things in historical context. The Holocaust was not Muslims. It was Christian Europe. Pius XII, if you're a Catholic sitting in this audience, you should really object to Pope Benedict XVI, who I think is a very moral and holy man. I am amazed that he's going to beatify a man who had a voice to the world and watched 1,000 Jews, I'm pretty sure it was October 1943, in Rome, forget about knowing about the whole Holocaust, he watched 1,000 Jews who were rounded up. And by the way, if you read this incredible book called It's by a Jewish man named Katz, and I can't remember the title of the book, but he explains that the SS truck drivers who came to Rome to round up the Jews from the Rome ghetto and take them to Auschwitz had never been to Rome, so they decided to sightsee. So they parked their trucks filled with 1,000 Jews in front of St. Peter's Square and started taking pictures. So the Jews are locked up in back, the Nazis are taking pictures, the Pope is watching this from his window, and he still said nothing. They were dead within 2 days, gassed to death. That's a holy man. So it's not true that the blame just lies with Islam. And by the way, to the extent that Judaism can be guilty of any kind of atrocities, I spoke to a religious Jew the other day that told me that all goyim are not, they're not God's children the way we are. That's disgusting. It's abominable, and it dare never be said in the name of Judaism. I'm sick of religious intolerance. And my final point: if you're going to tell me that Constantine is an issue, that you're saying that, and Doug made this point as well. Okay, let's get this right. So in 325, was it, Constantine sees the cross and he suddenly marries?
A little earlier.
Okay. But then the problem is, then...
The Shabbat for the Sunday.
Right. Then you have to dismantle a lot more in Christianity, Doug.
That's
right. The fact, once we start doing that, let's see. Constantine had earlier murdered his own son.
That's right.
And in Constantine's sword, the author's argument is that Constantine, to assuage and alleviate his guilt, he really embraces this story about the death of Christ, how God killed his own son. Suddenly, Christianity goes from a life-affirming religion that focuses on the life of Jesus, which is moral and ethical, to the death of Jesus, which can be seen as a little bit bloody and gory. I watched The Passion of the Christ. I'm not a Christian. I don't think that's why I wasn't inspired. I'm just not inspired by a movie that is pure violence. A man being beaten for 2 hours is supposed to be inspired by that. And some people say that comes from Constantine as well. And what about the whole idea of deification of a man? I am not here to protest Christian theology. Obviously, I said Christianity is a godly religion. But certainly, from the Torah's perspective, the whole idea of a human sacrifice, as you well know, is called an abomination several times. The book of Ezekiel, the book of Deuteronomy.
It's not a human sacrifice.
Well, he was human, he was sacrificed.
There's a difference between the sacrifice condemned in the scriptures is different to someone who willingly gives his life and who actually becomes guilty by taking other sins on him. That's quite different to someone who's innocent. And it's not someone being killed by his father. It's someone who's killed by sinful people. So that thing, let's say it's human sacrifice, it's just not right. I'd love to hear from some other questions in the audience because...
Romans were dictators, and that's why they were able to kill him.
From my own studies, I've actually found, this is to both rabbis, if they want to answer. On my personal studies, I've actually found that the theology of Judaism in the last 100 years have shifted. In the first half of the century, of the 20th century, you didn't really have Zionism. The belief that the Jews had to go back to Israel, which I believe, if you look at history, the recent violence that has caused all these differences between Israel and the Palestinians have been due to Zionism, which, if you look at the early century, the theological arguments of most rabbis was really more peaceful, like, we'll get back when God calls us back. And I think it shifted after Israel became a state again. And my question to you, what is your view on that?
Well, I want to make sure that I just answered a lengthy question, so...
You're the moderator. You're
by the way, are you a Christian Zionist?
No, I'm not a Zionist.
Well, the reason why I was saying that, and just because I think it relates to the whole war issue, because I believe that's what has escalated. So, I'm just saying that.
Please.
I'm the moderator tonight, but I guess this is my pulpit, and I'll take executive privileges. That is an incorrect statement. Zionism dates its roots from the time of Moses, and even before, from the time of Abraham, and that is 3,400 years ago, when God promised Abraham that he will inherit the land. In fact, this past week's parashah, past week's order of the Bible that we read, basically speaks about Abraham being commanded by God to leave his country, his homeland, his father's household, and go to the land of Israel at that time. And he promised him that that land will be his and for all his generations to come. That promise is realized with the return of the Jews from Egypt after being freed from slavery into the land of Israel, and 40 years of journey in the desert as they come to Israel and they conquer that land. At that time was known as the land of the Canaanites. And so that was consummated right there and then.